This is the Headless Marketing Show. Hi, I'm Alex Belding, the co-founder of Webrick. Welcome to the Headless Marketing Show, a podcast all about digital marketing and e-commerce with a focus on emerging marketing technologies and methods. In each episode, we talk to marketing leaders as they outline their thoughts and visions around modern marketing and the future of the web. If you are interested in building great customer experiences online and creating strong digital marketing strategies, then this is a podcast you don't want to miss. The Headless Marketing Show is brought to you by Webrick and DXP Studio. With DXP Studio, marketing teams can build personalized experiences in minutes, not days or weeks. Personalize your marketing and deliver the right content for the right user at the right time with DXP Studio. Visit Webrick.com to learn more. Be sure to subscribe to this show wherever you find your podcasts. Today, I'm excited to introduce Camille Trent. She is the head of marketing over at Dooley. Dooley is a sales enablement tool, and they market themselves as the fastest way to update Salesforce, take sales notes, and easily manage deals. They aim to help salespeople save 5+ hours of work a week. They have adopted a headless CMS at Dooley to manage their content, both on their application and on their website. In this case, they have chosen Contentful as their headless content management system. As we talk to Camille today, you'll get to kind of get a look at what her life is like as a content marketer using headless CMS. And I asked her for her opinions on the pros and cons of that kind of architecture. And we also talk a lot about the importance of layering in no-code tools to help the marketing team publish landing pages and experiences that need to be developed fast for campaigns and that maybe don't need to involve the development world as much. The big question I had for Camille revolves around how the marketing world and developer worlds can become better connected. She had a number of great ideas on how marketing can adopt better tools and run more like an engineering team, and using no-code tools for their testing and experimentation. Camille also talked a lot about empathy and enablement and developing a culture of enablement, creating a workflow where the marketing team is able to work the way that they want to, but also working together with development teams with their tools and processes so that there can be total success when we work together. Both departments ultimately want to see the company succeed and grow, and both teams want to do their best work, she said. So allowing that to happen requires finding a synergy between marketing and development. All in all, this is a really fun conversation around headless content management. It really relates to campaigns, landing pages, SEO, and we had a really, really good time talking about all of the issues that surround deploying content and really running a successful content marketing strategy. So I hope you really enjoy the show. And without further ado, let's bring Camille in. Hey, Camille, thank you for being on the show today.
Happy to be here. Yeah, thanks for the invite.
Yeah, I'm excited to talk to you because you are a user of headless content management, right? Your entire company uses Contentful. What's that like?
Yeah, no, it's cool. So we have like two different sites kind of set up within the site, right? Of the marketing site and then essentially the rest of the site right now. And so it's like, it has those two different blocks. And so I can see how that would be helpful for both the marketers and the developers, right? Where you just kind of have your zone like set up of like, stay here and stuff. So that we as like the marketers don't break things, which we tend to do or want to do. And the developers like can continue doing their thing without us like needing to tap their shoulders all the time. So it's been good so far.
Yeah, are you like, how many different content elements have you pulled into that CMS? Is it mostly some landing pages and a blog, or do you manage, I mean, I guess, how have you implemented Headless CMS?
Yeah, so if you take a look at our resources page, like we kind of have this overall like resources page. And so then within Contentful, like it's separated like into blogs or media. And so then we have kind of different landing pages set up based on the different types of pages on there. And so a basic example would be that we have a couple media pages that right now are really just links out to guest work that we do. So for instance, like this podcast right now, like might go on that page where we have a podcast, for instance, of anyone in our company that's been on a podcast. We have kind of like this library view of all of those with the cover art, and then click on those and it just like links back out to these other pages. And so it's kind of like a way for us to archive all that information and repurpose that information. So that's what I like about that. And then we have other views that are, specifically for the blog, right? And so more of like that long form traditional blog.
Well, and then how, like in your worldview, how does Headless CMS make your life easier as a marketer? I mean, do you have any opinions there?
Yeah, no, I like so I still don't totally understand it, like as a marketer, just full disclosure. But like in talking to developers, so for instance, like we're bringing on a front end developer, and so you want to equip like the marketing team with the tools that are going to make them work the best, and the best meaning like how they prefer to work, and then what's going to set the marketing team up for success. And so again, it comes back to speed and quality, right? And so if you're able to, create these spaces, like the front-end developers that I've talked to prefer Headless CMS because it lets them work the way they want. So that's number one, like kind of like a reason why to do it. But then two, like you're able to get like a high quality thing because they're going to just build it out right the first time, instead of a marketer coming in and kind of like hacking things together, which, don't get me wrong, like there's a time and a place for that too. And we, for instance, like you use Unbounce for landing pages. And I think that's a great tool for just like putting things together, and it's that drag and drop builder. So I'm a big fan of like kind of both methods, like for different processes. But I think if you're doing a repeatable strategy, which in content marketing, like it's the stuff you're trying to make things that people are going to come back to, like you're trying to be somebody's favorite. Right. And I think I got that from Brendan Hufford. So shout out to him of just being someone's favorite. But it should be like a repeatable play, like an evergreen type thing. And for something like that, I think you want to bring development in, set something up right, like give you the playground, like as a marketer, and the guardrails to play in. And so I think it works great for that. And then for little campaigns, like for shorter term things, I think for that, it does make more sense for the marketer to go in and do like those, like a drag and drop kind of like hack together thing, right? And so you have to start with like, what are you trying to accomplish and what's the timeline?
Right. Well, and like there's pages that you need to build for SEO or for that are like longer term and they're more programmatic, right? And then like a Headless CMS is great for that. And then there's when you're throwing spaghetti at the wall, right? You as the marketer have no idea what's going to work, what's not going to work. And it's probably, correct me if I'm wrong, in your guys' worldview, more related to maybe your like ad campaigns or your social campaigns where, you're basically trying to quickly introduce, in this case, Dooley, to people that don't necessarily know you yet at all. And then, like design matters and the experience matters. Plus, maybe if we try this headline versus that headline versus this third headline, and like that kind of iteration and that quick stuff, make it a lot easier to be in a no code tool like Unbounce, where you don't have to talk to a developer whatsoever, right? You can just go publish your content.
No, yeah, I think you nailed it. So when speed is the priority, and like testing is the priority, and collecting data on like what works and why, kind of before you build out, okay, this is what we want our template to be, then that's, I think, like where it makes sense. And but like I've been in a situation too, like where we use Webflow, which we were talking before, that's kind of like an in-between sort of like situation. Webflow and HubSpot was like another one we've used for landing pages before. But Webflow I'll talk about because in that situation, a developer, like our front-end developer, came in and built the template like the way that we needed it for repeatable landing pages. So it was something that was somewhat temporary, right? Like the actual content was somewhat temporary. But it was like built in a similar way to our blog. It looked really professional. Like we were able to reuse it for similar content. And so that kind of falls in between for me, because we would do kind of like short blog style for that. Like it was still kind of content marketing, and it was still really not that paid advertising is like not useful content, but it was kind of like in between, where it was like informational, but like still, but a little bit salesy, like was optimized for conversion. So in that case, if you kind of like want to do a series of those things, I think it makes sense like to bring in a developer and to work with a headless CMS.
Right. Yeah. Like if you're going to have more of a templated approach, but it's a well-developed template, because I like with Unbounce, right, you're just going to a library of stuff, and you're doing your best to kind of make that look and feel like the Dually website, or not even at all, right? Like, hey, we just need a landing page. Let's quickly get something live. Whereas if you want it to really feel like, hey, this is, it almost feels like it's part of the main website, you're going to need to talk to front-end development. But they can still build that into, in your guys' case, Contentful, right? So that you could then go build a new landing page whenever you darn well please, right?
Yeah. And I think the other big pro, like for something like Headless CMS, is the SEO juice. So like getting people to actually like come to your site, like having all of those views like from the landing pages count as site views, right? Because you built that template on your site. Rather than spinning it up kind of like on a separate site or a separate domain. And so that's like another thing to consider too, is like, again, it goes back to like how long-term is this, but that's right. Something that we've had to think about too.
Well, and so as you kind of view like what Dually is doing, do you think that there's a future for you guys to like pull some of those pages into your Headless CMS, or is it just the way like that you're going to be focused on, kind of Unbounce for the time being, just staying with Unbounce and like using the no code for what it's for, and then running more of like your longer page and like your resource oriented content through the Headless CMS?
Yeah, no, I think for things that we know are repeatable, that we're gonna try and like build those out on our site as much as possible. And for instance, we're investing in a front-end engineer like for the marketing team, right? And so like once we have that in place, he should be joining next month, so really excited about that. But once we have that in place, like we'll be able to do that and stuff. And so this depends kind of where you're at as a company, and if you can invest in that resource, which I think it's great when you can do that sooner rather than later. And then if you can't, yeah, like Unbounce, like I said, is a great solution. So, but for things that are longer term, when you can, like get that resource in, see that you can build those out. Because once you have that, it does make marketing a lot easier, because now you're not worried about like the design part of it and like the logistics part of just making something. Like you just go in there and you drop in the images and you drop in the text, and like that's it, rather than like having to mess with the actual like design.
Right. Well, and it allows you, like, your position, right? You're head of content. You get to focus on content, right? Like, yeah. What's the strap line? What are the main messages I want to deliver on this page? What are the keywords I'm trying to target for SEO, right? And, you don't have to worry about like, will this thing look good on a particular Samsung mobile device, or will it show up correctly in, Safari and Chrome and all those things, all the developer oriented things.
Yeah. You listed off a bunch of good things. Like that's all part of like the user testing and the experience and stuff. And so, yeah, if development can even own a portion of that, right? Then it kind of like frees someone like me that's more like wanting to be more focused on content to do that.
Mm-hmm. Well, and so you guys have a whole development team, I assume, taking care of your product, right? I mean, like that's, and
yes, yeah.
And is this new hire going to be the first, full-time developer that will be available to the marketing department?
Yeah, he'll be like the only front end developer that we have. Yeah,
That's really exciting because I assume I talked to a number of companies that don't have like dedicated developers for marketing, and sometimes like marketing and the development departments can like be like oil and water, right? Because like your marketing's like, hey, we have an issue over here. Can you look at us? And they're like, no, man, I'm looking at the product. Like, like we have 10,000 active users. Like,
Yeah. It's tough because like marketing doesn't want to bother product. Like obviously we want the product to be good, and we want them to focus on their job and like the things that they were hired to do. But when something breaks and we can't fix it, like. We also like want marketing to be successful in our ability to market the product. Like it's all cyclical, right? And so they've been great about jumping in and helping on those things. But we try to limit like those asks, and that's part of the reason that I'm bringing up Unbounce and bringing up like kind of these other solutions, and why it's been nice to kind of like have some of these pages like just already built out and for the most part like not breaking. So yeah.
Well, and like you can do a lot of your testing in a no-code environment where you don't have to bother development. And then once you've learned the lessons, you're like, hey, this particular landing page is crushing it. We can probably, up the user experience by building it into the CMS. Having a dedicated developer to marketing, makes you a lot more capable to have those requests, weekly versus, we don't want to bother them. So like, as you see it, like, how do you envision in a perfect world, right? Like marketing and development getting along? Like, are there pros to not having developers on the marketing department? Are there cons to not having any developers available to you? Like, what's kind of your, view on development and marketing working together?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I think it depends on your content marketing strategy and your growth marketing strategy. So for instance, if you're not investing heavily in, paid acquisition, right? Or like paid ads, and you might not need different iterations of landing pages. Or if you're able to just like set everything up at once and you just find that you don't have to do very many other experiments, then then that will kind of tell you like how much maybe to like invest in development. Like I think it's like nice to have, but I don't know that you want to hire like a nice to have hire, right? Like it should be like a need to have hire in general. And so for us, like we are starting to invest in paid, like we're investing in content, like those are our two like big pillars like for marketing. And as we're taking like a look at the website and restructuring some things, knowing that we have like that resource in-house, and like we're able to fix things on the fly. So again, that speed thing, but then also spin up landing pages, spin up content programs, like all of that is really exciting. So I think for a lot of teams, like a lot of high growth SaaS teams, it makes sense. But I think the main thing is like, is it a need to have or is it a nice to have? Like figuring that out for yourself of like, how much time, I think this is another way to think about it, how much time am I spending on trying to put these things together and on the development, and how much faster would a developer be, slash how much is it taking me away from my job to do something I'm not very good at. Like sometimes I look at it that way of like, how much faster would someone else be trying to do what I'm doing right now? So,
well, and yeah, I like because I mean, at the end of the day, right, websites are just time, right? Whether it's a landing page, a blog post, a home page, whatever you're looking at on a .com or .io or whatever your particular is, you're just looking at AI. There you go. You're looking at labor, right? You're just looking at labor, and so and to your point, right? Marketing is best spent focusing on the content aspects of the page. And then development have to they have to go build templates and other things to help you guys publish content. You had mentioned that having time is important, but also how you use the website, and I think that's something that a lot of people maybe gloss over, both when they're reaching for no-code tools or when they're reaching for custom dev with a headless CMS, right? Like, how the website will be used in the marketing mix and in the sales funnel and, in the general go-to-market strategy is really, really, really important. In your mind's eye, like, as you guys are using no-code tools, have you ever found like, oh man, like I wish we would have, brought on development sooner, because now we have to bring all these pages that we built in Unbounce over to Contentful, and we're going to have to rebuild everything. Have you ever had that kind of technical debt kind of kick you in the gut, or has that not happened at Dooley at all?
Yeah, so I haven't been here long enough, I think, for that to be the case. Like, there's been small things, like the thing that comes to mind is that you don't necessarily think about is, so you have like this space carved out for you that's like, this is your marketing space. But then when there's something that is part of like the overall site template, so for instance, like we had G2 banners that were from like, I think winter of last year, but we had won more awards and we were wanting to update that. And so, that becomes like a small ask of like, hey, like, can we update like this part of the template, and then making sure that it actually like updates across the site and it's not like a separate one on a different. So it depends on how it's built, but there are some things like that are kind of like inherent to the overall site template, but that need to be updated every once in a while. But it's not a big enough deal. I think that we would need a developer full time for that. But there's some things like that where you just don't notice like that you need them until you absolutely need them.
Well, and being able to change and adapt your content model is a big. And I know you're a newer hire to Dooley. Are you involved in kind of constantly assessing your content model in Contentful and like, asking for changes and because like the beauty of a headless CMS, right, as you just alluded to, is you can quickly iterate and change the back-end publishing experience, and you can have a single source of truth so that if you hit update on the banner, it affects all banners. But if you have your content model off, you can basically implement a headless CMS just like WordPress, right? Where, no, I've got to go through and update this 19 times. I don't have a single source of truth. How do you guys inside of Dooley and kind of working with your headless CMS, how do you guys approach your content model? Is that something you meet on regularly? Is it something that you just scratch the itch when it's apparent?
Yeah, no, that's something that we're looking at right now, I would say, because really like when you set up a site or you set up content program, it starts with like the strategy of like what's everything like that we'll need, like what's like the next step after this, and then do we need to build that into the site. And so starting with a strategy and just trying to think big of like what you'd possibly like need as part of that, but not so big that you don't get started, I think is like
right.
The key there. And so we've been like growing fast. And so now we're kind of like reassessing, like, do we need, what other pages do we need? And does that mean like a different structure as part of like that marketing site? And so those are some things that we're considering now.
Yeah. And I like that phrase, like, you have to be so strategic that you're actually delivering value to the strategy, but not ridiculously strategic that you never get started.
Right. Like you have to be okay with the fact that it's not going to be perfect. Like there's no such thing, because it might actually be like exactly what you need right now and not what you need in a year from now. Like that's not a bad thing. Like that doesn't mean that you missed anything necessarily. It just means that like stuff has changed. So I think, trying to have some like future vision on it, and some future proofing of like especially just like how you're setting up the site and that's why it's important to bring in kind of like an SEO consultant or make sure someone on the team like has that as far as like just how you're building the site and if that's going to make sense. So that kind of stuff, like that kind of future proofing, but also just knowing that you don't know what your company is going to look like in a year or two from now.
Right. Which is like, I always tell folks that's a major benefit to being on a headless CMS is the fact that like you can address your content model pretty quickly and make some fairly large changes to how you publish your content without having to like rebuild a website, say if you are on WordPress, right? How often do you guys make it a point to kind of address your content model? Is it like habitual, or is it, all right, we've made our decisions, let's run this for the next quarter? Do you have a process in-house?
Yeah, like I said, I haven't been here for a super long time, but I would say that in general, like we work in quarters, and so that means kind of like assessing what's working and not working in quarters, and then for smaller things like in months, I would say too. So I would say like quarterly to some degree for something as big as like content structure and models.
Right, yeah, because you don't want to change it every week, because then at the end of the day, you have to be publishing content, right? Like, so in your capacity as like head of content, like what are some of the content elements that you're most excited about in terms of like, generating experiences that keep people coming back, right? What's working well for you?
Yeah, I think like the ability, so once you like build out the page like the way that you want it, there's still like finding out that there's still like ways to iterate on that and to do experiments and stuff. And so I like, when we're able to run experiments and look at something like a Hotjar, look at like GA and like watch small changes like make a difference, right? And when you are able to like to move fast, whether you're on Headless or whether you're using like an unbalanced type of solution, like you can do that, like you can make like a small change and then like the next day like this happened today, of like our company like recently hired a lifecycle marketer, and so some of his like first tasks have been like those CRO type things of like improving conversions on page. And so like seeing it like in real time though, of like little like seemingly small updates, but seeing them actually make a difference like is what's cool for me.
Well, and the impact of content, right? And because sometimes it's changing the words, right? And then other times it's just changing the packaging, right? Like the words are the exact same, but we've dressed them up in a different suit, right?
Yeah. Or like another example would be from Marketer Hire. Like we would get compliments on the look of our blog a lot too, and so sometimes it's just like the feel like of it too. It's the content. Our content was really good, but then having like a coat that matched, right? Like to have kind of like that skin that like that matched like how good the content was. Because it's always a bummer like when you create good content but the user experience isn't great, or like the style like of the blog isn't great. And so and those are just not usually things that you can change. And so so that's something too that I've noticed that makes a difference like in the user experience and in like the readability even of something, is having that set up in a way that is inviting to people.
Well, and that's been a major push, from this, like from Google, right? They just started rolling out the user experience update. If you're vying for, position 1, 2, or 3 on a specific keyword, that page experience is fundamental, right? I mean, and it will only get more important, right? Because they just started this. Have you seen? I'm curious to know. Like you probably have enough traffic and enough of an eye on SEO. Have you seen that new user experience rollout affect you in any way, shape, or form?
Yeah, I mean So for instance, I'll go back to like Hotjar, right? Like I can see like when people are clicking on. I mean, you can see this in Google Analytics as well. But like when you see it at the page level of like how someone interacts with the page and stuff, and you see that they're either clicking on the table of contents which we don't really have right now. Like on Dually, we had it at Marketer Hire, but that's, for instance, that's one thing that we're looking at. That one that people are using that, and you can see that in Google Analytics, that like that's a page that comes up is like with that table of contents, like and like to the URL, like you can see
right.
are using it.
You can see the hashtag element, right? Yeah.
And then the other thing is like when you have like related content too. So this is like, again, something that we just saw today, looking at how someone was like experiencing the blog and seeing like which of the related content that they were mostly clicking on too, right? And so it's just cool to see when you can see like some of those best practices, like being more than best practices, like being like real life. Like how people
it's not an idea.
how people interact with content is as I was like seeing like I think there were 4 related content things, and most people were going to one of them, and so that's a good insight. And then also like the call to actions at the bottom, like how people are interacting with that. Seeing people go all the way down the page, but then for other ones, like if it's just all concentrated at the top, like those are all things, and this is becoming like a pitch for Hotjar, but like that, and like in Google Analytics you can see like how people use the content, and then to your point, whether using Unbounce or something else, but I think especially like if you're just trying to do those experiments, then you can take all those learnings and you can compile them into like this is what we need to build, like what this is like the long-term play that we need. And so for instance, that's something that we're doing, is like looking at other blogs, and I'm working with like a great SEO like consultant to help with this, but he's like compiling like all the best things of the best blogs, and like taking all those, and then we're gonna like take all those learnings back to like, okay, here's like what we want to build, like and so that's like what can be fun, is just like finding your favorite things from a bunch of different places and turning it into your thing.
Well, and like like, yes, it's maybe a pitch for Hotjar, but really it's a pitch for just looking at your data, right? Like however you're getting it, right? Like, are you using Hotjar, Optimizely? I mean, you name it, right? There's a bazillion choices there. But fundamentally, right? Like checking out your users. What are they doing? How are they actually moving through your content and discovering the stuff that, because like, oftentimes as a marketer, right, you're pretty well, like you're doing a lot of assuming, right? We think, based upon our ideal customer profile, and based upon, what we know from our sales guys, and based upon, our like general Google Analytics, we think this will work, but you have to just go try it, right? And then you have to find out what is actually working, which is, probably to your case, like, why having a development team member will be so awesome, because you now can, learn your lessons in a no code, see what's working on your blog, combine those 2 data sets, and now do template updates and refreshes on the front end without having to change your content management system, right? Because, like, kind of back to why Headless can be so powerful, it is decoupled. And so your front end designer can put in major updates to the front end without changing your life as a content publisher, right? You can continue to research and create content and publish, and then all of a sudden, bazinga, overnight, the website is brand new, and it's a lot faster.
No, and I think you brought up a good point, of you're kind of hinting at, like, the customer, like, being very important in all this process. And I really think, like, if you take the time to understand, like, your customer and what they want, it makes, like, development and design, like, a lot less stressful. And it, like, definitely makes content creation and marketing a lot less stressful, because you know where to start. And so, like, something that I feel like I should bring up is, the reason that I knew that people liked the design of the Marketer Hire blog is because, like, I got a few DMs, like, people, like, through LinkedIn of, like, one, like that tells me that you're like reading the content, you're interacting with the content in one way, but then also like, hey, like we really liked how you did your blog, like what are you using, like that's
Right.
usually a good sign. It's like partly like when other marketers like want to steal that same idea, right, of like how can we like tap into like what's working for you guys. And so there's those kind of comments. And then on the actual content itself, like I also like being able to ship on social or ship in a community, so you can get kind of that real-time feedback of like, do people like this blog, do people like this type of content, or do they not? And so those are kind of like quick ways to do that experimentation, that you may not even need like a low code or no code like situation, because like if you're implementing something like a user leap or a Hotjar like to your site, and you're able to do like survey data, like that could be one way. And then there's social data, like there's lots of different ways to get that data too. And so it's not like you have to like build it all out. Like think about like what's the MVP like model for getting customer feedback. And I would say like the path of least resistance is just being talking to people. And so like starting out with like reaching out to people, having those interviews, but then creating some sort of like a channel, like a two-way channel, whether that's a community or whether that's like social or whether that's survey data, so that you can be gathering that stuff, and maybe you don't even need to like stand up a site for a short-term solution. You can get that data and feel confident enough like to build it out.
Well, and you've brought up a great point, because like if you have the data and you're confident in your choices, it's a lot easier to then go hand that off to a developer and say, look, we know this is what we want to build.
Right.
And because oftentimes too, like if you don't have dedicated assets just for your marketing team in the development side of your company, and you're still a marketer throwing spaghetti at a wall trying to figure out what works, that can really build up that animosity as well, because like the development team is like, wait a minute, we just shipped a new version to production 4 weeks ago. Why are we now rebuilding everything?
Yeah. That's so my husband's like a scientist, like works on mice, like that type of research scientist. And so I see this like in the academic world of like how stressful and like disheartening like it can be when you just do all of these experiments like over and over again, and they take weeks, like for to do this, and then to not get the data that you want and have to do it all over again and stuff. So that's necessary, obviously, like for science. But if you can avoid like some of that, if you can do some of the research or eliminate some of the pain and like the unnecessary, you still need to do experiments, but eliminate some of the unnecessary experiments where we're just guessing to try and, because a lot of companies will do this with marketing, right? It's like not start with a strategy, try a bunch of things, eventually land on something, and hopefully at that point, like go with that thing, double down on that thing. But is it unnecessary? Like, could you have gotten to that place faster by just having like a solid strategy and talking to customers?
Imagine
still be iterating, still be like guessing, like in some ways, but having, more educated guess to start with, so it doesn't take as long to get there.
Well, I'm reminded of a post you had on social media maybe a month ago, like hope is not a content marketing strategy, right? Like you can't hope it's going to work, because like you're statistically not going to be right?
Yeah,
like it's going to be wrong.
I think that's a shout out to, because that was for one of my podcasts. That was Justin Simon, like who said that, and but I love it because it's true. It's simple and true. Of like one way that he goes about it that I've started thinking about now too is when you're starting like a content strategy, what comes first? Like and sometimes it can be like, what does the user or the reader like need to know to give this thing context? So what comes first, and then like what comes next? And so a lot of times I think about this as like the promotion strategy, right? Of like, once we build this thing, and again, this happening before you're building, or like like if we build this thing, like how are we going to distribute it? How is it going to make an impact? How is it going to, generate business metrics, right? And so thinking about those things before you start, instead of like starting, be like, now what? Like you never want to be in like a now what situation. If you can be like, yeah, this is, they have all the context they need. Like it's time to build this thing, and this is how we're going to ship it.
Well, and I noticed, so, like to bring in Webrick, right? Like we service a lot of websites, and I can tell very quickly from how they use our service if they're shooting from the hip or if they actually have a plan, right? I mean, you can almost immediately see it in the way that they operate our service and go about managing their website. And I like what like if you're asking what comes next, that's a big sign that like there's something broken in our process, right? We're not necessarily sure what, but that's a big like red flag, right? Like what's next?
Right. Yeah. Is that like there should be some sort of map, right? And as part of the content strategy. And so when there's not, then that's fine. But as long as you like learn from it or like try to, because it's you in SaaS companies and startup companies, like you're usually moving pretty fast. Like you're never going to be at a point where you're like, everything's organized, we have all of the systems in place. Like
yeah, you're not a bank,
nothing more
right?
to do.
Like, yeah.
Like it's just a well-oiled machine. Like you can eventually get there, but it's usually like you're walking in a line of like moving really fast, like getting things out, doing things like on the fly, and while trying to like build like a system so it's eventually like a more repeatable process.
Well, and it's like you can be, if you find yourself asking what comes next, it's not like, I have to like reevaluate my whole life and sob in a corner over it, right? Like it just shows you that like, oops, something flubbed up somewhere. Let's improve this. And if you're only doing it seldom, it shows that you also just have a healthy, growth track, right? Like you're actually pushing the envelope. But if like every day you wake up and you're like, man, what are we doing here? Like that's also like, maybe you should go sob in a corner, right? Like you have to find that mix. Well, so like kind of to go back to the conversation around like involving marketing with development. Like how have you found, using development to be, like, is there any processes that you guys have internally that makes that smoother? Is there, is it mostly just being very strategic and understanding what you need and capturing your user data to then make decisions, with a little bit more authority? Like what's worked well for you guys at Dooley there?
Yeah, sorry, I have like a tractor outside.
Oh, that's all right.
Or they must be cutting the grass. Anyways, yeah, so you're talking about from the development process?
Well, and like just the relationship between development and marketing, right? Because obviously you like development helps us build the front end and create those experiences. But then, marketing, we need to iterate, we need to publish, we need to drive that experience, at least that marketing experience. How have you guys, have you found a way to work well together? Things that work, things that didn't work, any lessons there?
Yeah. So we have like a full, engineering team or a decent sized engineering team, on the product side of things. And so for me, it's partly been like, spying on like product and how they're doing things, right? And then I also read a book that was called Led Seo, and it was all kind of from like this product side of things too, and even like the processes that they were doing to make things like run smoothly and to make sure that like there were tickets and that they got addressed. And so I'm starting to think of like content as a product. Like how can you shape like the content team to run like a product team, like where it is very like systematic and like run by engineers, and clean. And so we use Confluence and like the Atlassian suite for the product side of things, and are starting to kind of use that for marketing as well, because that's not, I feel like, not really a marketing tool, or it's not typically like used, but like we want to work like collaboratively with the product team, and like I said, like kind of like operate systematically, and being able to build a marketing engine. And so taking some of like the things that I'm learning and putting together kind of like a solution that way, and then talking to, you know, like front end developers on how they like to work. I think this is a really important part of it, is that like it doesn't matter like how you like to work, like as the content person, if the developer is not on board. So I think number one thing is like getting everyone on board like with the process, and not being like, this is the process, we're gonna do it this way. Like have it be like an open communication. So, you know, starting there, asking like the team, for instance, right now, like me asking the product teams of like how they use these things, like if they think it will work for marketing, things like that. And then, you know, and then me like starting to get into it, of like just starting to use Confluence like for notes and things, and like getting familiar with it before completely like making that switch. So for instance, like at my last company, we would do one pagers. So kind of like the one page strategy doc of like, this is what the project is and like how it's going to work. Here's the objective. Here's the next steps. One pager like that in Word docs. And so, you know, a simple step is like, okay, let's try and like build something like that out into Confluence, and like, so we can get comfortable. It's in there. It's like more of an archived, like better system, I think, for that at the team level. And then, you know, knowing that that is like the way that the developers like to work, like in my talking to them, and talking to this front end developer that we're bringing on, making sure that he likes to work that way. So starting there, but then yeah, Confluence, and then whether or not it's going to be like Jira or like another project management system, figuring out again like the what comes next, of like, we're going to start it here, but then what's going to happen next, like how are we going to track it. And so yeah, having some sort of, I think, like task level project management tool, and I think it can be either one of those, Trello, ClickUp, have something.
Yeah, there's a lot of
like
choice
that.
there. Yeah.
And yeah, and then also like measuring. So like figuring out in advance, like, how are we going to measure the success of this? I think that'll be part of like the one pager, or we identify that, but then it's also like the tools, right? Is it going to be like in my case, it'll often be like a Google Analytics. But then, you know, can it go all the way back to like the CRM of like, can we track like the actual conversions, and whether or not and if it's like signups, and that's maybe something that we can track on like the site level. If it's more, if it's revenue, then like tracking that back to the CRM. So yeah, I think it's like starting with at the team level, how do we want to work? Like, how are we comfortable working? How have we worked in the past? What's worked well? That's having that kind of conversation. And then just like starting to actually doing it, like to actually like moving toward that, while not sort of breaking what you already have.
Right. Well, and that does put you in a major advantage being on a headless, right? Is because generally speaking, most developers, when polled, love working in the API first worldview, right? A single programming language front to back. I just have to build API calls out to the front end, versus like, if you're on like a more of a monolithic system, like where with WordPress, right, where like you, the marketer, dream up this amazing experience, and they're like, how do we make WordPress do that, right? Whereas with Contentful, we can do that because we have complete control of the front end as a development team, and then you as the marketing team still get total control of the content. It's but you hit the nail on the head. If you don't have the communication strategy to like really, talk to each other and understand each other, a lot of marketing departments end up, either being in a very tech oriented position where the marketers, have a love-hate, mostly a hate relationship with their content management, or they're using a CMS that they can, that they understand and they like, and the developers are like, we can't stand this, right? So like, if you can really build that communication, being on a headless CMS is a great middle ground for both the marketing team to get a ton of advantage, and the development team to get a ton of advantage.
I'll try like not to get too like deep with this, but I just feel like most things like go back to like empathy and like communication. Like if you have empathy and communication, and I don't always, everyone is working on this, but that's really like a big part of it. So, at like the management level, it's asking your team, like, how do you like to work? How can I take away those obstacles? And these are a lot of these, like I learned from Michelle Peach, who's our VP of revenue, and she was on a podcast recently, talked kind of like through leadership and management and how to do that effectively for a sales team. But I think this can apply to all teams. She's like, I've found out like like the hard way that even if you have like this great strategy and have this great plan and you like roll it out to the team and you're like, this is what we're going to do. If you like just tell them that's what they're going to do, like that's not going to go over so well. It's got to start like person to person and have like that trust and that like empathy built of like, what are your struggles? How can I help you? And then build solutions from there. Like whether that's process solutions or other types of team solutions, like it needs to start with the trust and the empathy. So starting there and then rolling that up into the communication as well, because you're just going to have more buy-in that way before like I said, if you've engineered it all out and everything is like perfect, like it still like doesn't guarantee success like of the process. Like on paper it might be perfect, but I think it starts with hiring the right people, but also explaining the vision. Like this is why we're doing it this way. I'm open to like feedback on it, like being open to being wrong too, of doing it like a different way. Because I think whatever solution that we choose, like as we're working out the exact structure and like plans and systems for marketing as our team is growing, it's not going to be everybody's like favorite thing. Like everybody has like project management is a great example of like some people like ClickUp, some people like Asana, some people will like
and they have a ton of opinions, right?
Right.
Because we're humans.
Maybe part of it is because that's the main thing that they've used. And so this is a big thing in marketing, I think in general, is finding people who are adaptable or like open to change. But then I think especially like as the leader, like being the one that I think like has to be in some ways like the most adaptable to change, because it should be, I think a lot of times like coming from the team, coming from everyone else, of like, what are your challenges and like how can I make them better, and not like what are my challenges, how can you make them better? Like that's not going to go over well. And so like if it turns out that everyone on the team except you like loves Asana, like maybe just learn Asana, that seems like the path of least resistance, but also making sure that it fits what you're trying to accomplish.
Well, that was like a really good almost masterclass on like how to manage interdepartmental communications, right? Like that was brilliant.
Well, I mean, yeah, I'm like pretty new to this. And so, like I said, it's just like me trying to listen and watch and spy on like what some of like my favorite leaders have done in the past. But you see those themes everywhere. And like, I mainly try and just lean on what did I really like as an individual contributor, like what like made my day. And a lot of times it's like, words of like affirmation, right? Of like knowing like when you're doing a good job, and like, but also just knowing that you're being heard. Like if you have an idea and if you're like, hey, like I think we should do it this way, and even if that doesn't happen, like if they don't go with your idea, just knowing that it was heard and that it was actually evaluated, that it was actually considered. Like you can tell when it's not. And so I think like those two things are things that I'm trying to carry over. That's
awesome. Well, kind of one last question for you, and then we'll be done today. But I really appreciate having you on the show. What would be like your tidbit of advice for folks that are maybe researching headless CMS? Just things to be mindful of, things that you've liked, things that just give us a quick kind of read on headless CMS and kind of a final word on the show today.
Yeah, no, I think so far so good. So we kind of talked about how Webflow is kind of that in-between solution. So I have like some experience with that, and before that WordPress, which is the opposite. But I think to go through the pros and cons, like something like WordPress, like it's easier to start with, and then maybe can be harder to scale, because like as you scale, you're adding more plugins, and you're adding just more stuff, like it's getting bigger and maybe like harder to manage that way, and harder, but also harder to segment for instance, segment out like into like a marketing site, you know? And so those are some of the things there is like, I think on its face, like it can look like the best situation like for a content marketer, and you have all the tools there. But like there's also like some underlying problems of speed and like those add-ins and just things that you might not think about from the developer point of view. So there's that. And then something like a Webflow I really liked, because that's where we were able to spin up kind of like these dedicated landing pages that were part of like the overall site template, like they lived on the site. And it was pretty straightforward. It did have like some glitches though. And so liked that one. And yeah, Contentful's probably been like the cleanest so far. And like I said, I do like the experience of being able to split up the sites and have kind of like your zone that you work in. And like I said, having it be knowing the developers like it is also a big thing for me too, is you want the developers to feel a part of the team, like, and not just be like they're on their own team, like, and feel like they don't have the resources. I think it should start with what the marketing team needs, but also what the developer needs and wants to, and finding that collaboration. So speed like was a big thing, or is a big thing for every developer that you talk to, and like their ability to kind of like create in the same way that I think content marketers, if content marketers are listening to this, in the same way that like we want to create like the best possible content and the best possible quality, like what I've noticed with especially like front-end developers, they want to like create the best possible site, and often at times that means like speed and like ease of use and those types of things. And so giving them, I think, the environment to be able to do that and to do like their best work, and to have something that's not just like a chore, like not treating them as like the janitors of your site, but treating them as like actual innovators, is what's going to help you like attract the best talent too. So that would be like the big pitch for something like a Contentful and just headless CMS in general.
Hey, you might have a job over at Contentful if you're not careful now.
No, I think Julie is pretty great, and so I'm going to be staying there for a while. But yeah, you're welcome to use that clip.
That was a good one.
If you'd like to sell headless.
Well, and at least to like help make it. It does. There was a lot of that was a great phrasing, like letting marketing do their best work while also letting dev do their best work, right? I mean, that if like I'm always saying, like if the Venn diagram of development and marketing could become a single circle, holy smokes, you can do all. Now you're talking about creating experiences, right? Versus just trying to do your best in whatever tool you're using. So
yeah.
Well, Camille, thank you so much for coming on to the show today. I really enjoyed our conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. It was a good way for me to kind of like start thinking more deeply about this subject as well. And so it's happy to join.
Thanks for listening to the Headless Marketing Show. Be sure to keep coming back for more episodes and discussions with marketing leaders where we talk about e-commerce, digital marketing, and all things related to the web. Remember to subscribe to the Headless Marketing Show on iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you find and listen to your podcasts. Quick shout out to our sponsor, Webrick, by which all of this is made possible. If you are looking for a website, go check out webrick.com. And that's the show, folks. Thank you very much for listening.